The rumble of motorcycles had only just faded into the thick, dry summer air, replaced by an uneasy hush that clung to the roadside town like smoke after a fire. A breeze stirred the dust along the cracked pavement, curling around the weather-beaten sign that hung above Darla's Diner, its rusted hinges groaning beneath the weight of time. The silence was broken by a voice, deep, gravelly, and laced with irritation. "Hey, lady, you deaf, or just plain stupid?" The speaker was a broad-shouldered man in a worn black leather vest stretched taut across a frame carved by bar fights and engine grease. Tattoos coiled up his arms like ivy choking an old oak, and his fists were balled at his sides, ready. Behind him stood 5 more bikers, arms crossed, watching like lions waiting for their cue. Their jackets bore a crimson emblem, a wolf howling at a full moon. The woman he was addressing stood no taller than his chest. A slip of a thing, she wore a faded floral dress and carried a simple wooden cane. Her back was slightly stooped, her silver hair swept into a tight bun. Around her neck, a delicate strand of pearls glinted in the sunlight, and on her face, more striking than any scar or threat, was a smile. Calm, composed, dangerous. She tilted her head slightly as if studying an odd curiosity at the zoo. "You lost, Granny," the biker said, taking a step forward. "This ain't exactly the kind of town where someone like you just wanders around alone." But the old woman didn't flinch. She didn't back down. She merely adjusted the pearls on her neck with the grace of someone who had once worn them to grander places, then tapped the tip of her cane gently against the pavement. Tap, tap, tap. Her eyes lifted to meet his, and her voice came low and melodic, like the last verse of an old blues song. "Oh, darling," she said. "You poor thing. You really have no idea, do you?" The biker's bravado wavered for just a second. There was something wrong here. No, not wrong, off. Deeply off. Behind him, his crew exchanged glances. It was subtle, but they felt it too. A shift in pressure. An ancient kind of stillness. The kind you only felt in church pews at funerals or moments before a storm split the sky open. And then, in a single breath, everything changed. With a movement so fast it seemed to defy age or physics, the cane in the woman's hand snapped apart. What had once been a walking stick was now a gleaming blade, thin and impossibly sharp. She held it like a concert violinist would hold her bow, with precision, with intimacy, with love. Gasps escaped from the few onlookers hiding behind the safety of the diner's porch. A waitress froze in place, the tray slipping from her hands and crashing onto the wooden planks below. A coffee mug shattered like a firecracker. The old woman sighed. "I was hoping to get my pie first," she said, almost to herself. "But I suppose this will do." In one seamless glide, she stepped forward, and the tip of her blade halted just a whisper away from the biker's throat. Close enough for him to feel the cold edge against the thrum of his pulse. He didn't move. Couldn't. "You think just because I'm old," she murmured, her smile still intact, "that I'm weak." Her voice dipped, silky and lethal. "That's the mistake every fool makes. And for most of them." She leaned closer, her breath warm against his stubbled jaw. "It's usually their last." The gang behind him stirred, some reaching toward their belts, but the leader, sweat now beading at his brow, raised a hand, halting them. He didn't understand it, not really. But every cell in his body screamed the same message: stand down. She was too calm, too sure, too practiced. Slowly, he opened his hands in surrender, his pride catching in his throat like a swallowed nail. The old woman nodded approvingly. With a graceful flick of her wrist, the blade retracted into its wooden sheath, and with a soft click, it was once again a cane. She tapped it twice on the pavement, then gently patted the biker's cheek. "Smart boy." And just like that, she turned. Her floral dress fluttered behind her as she strolled into the diner, humming what sounded like an old jazz lullaby. As if nothing had happened. The gang stood frozen. The leader exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. One of his men finally found his voice. What the hell just happened? The biker wiped the sweat from his brow and looked at the doorway the woman had just disappeared through. I don't know," he whispered, "but I'm buying that lady a damn pie." Inside the diner, the woman slid into a booth by the window. The waitress, still wide-eyed, approached with hesitant steps. "See, can I get you something?" she stammered. "Yes," the woman said, setting her cane beside her. "One slice of blackberry pie. And a glass of sweet tea if it's not too much trouble." The waitress nodded and all but ran to the kitchen. From the booth, the woman could see the gang still lingering outside, talking amongst themselves, casting anxious glances through the glass. She smiled again, this time softer. Not dangerous, just tired. They never see me coming, she thought. But the truth was, she hadn't always been invisible. Once, long ago, she had a name that carried weight in rooms filled with power and shadows. They had called her Evelyn Grace Monroe, cold raven to those in the know. A covert operative trained in counterintelligence, psychological warfare, and close-quarters combat. She had retired decades ago, disappeared. Really. Let the world forget her. Let her enemies think she'd faded with time. But sometimes, trouble didn't care about your retirement. Sometimes, it found you at a dusty roadside diner while you were craving pie. She hadn't drawn the blade in over 6 years. Not since Bogota. And even then, it was only to disarm a drunk arms dealer who had mistaken her for a tour guide. But there was a rhythm to violence, and muscle memory never truly faded. As she ate her pie, sweet, flaky, perfect, she watched the men outside finally mount their bikes and ride off, quieter now, humbled. Good. The last thing she wanted was to leave a mess. She finished the tea, left a generous tip, and stood. As she walked past the counter, she caught the eye of the young cook peering out from behind the kitchen door. "You be safe, ma'am," he said quietly. She paused. Then, with a kind nod, replied, "Always." And she meant it. From that day on, stories spread through the county. Of a mysterious elderly woman with a cane who made a whole biker gang retreat without a drop of blood spilled. Some said she was a retired assassin. Others claimed she was a ghost from an old war, still walking the earth to correct injustices. A few folks even swore they saw her cane glow before it turned into a sword. She didn't care much for stories. She cared about peace. And peace, she had learned, sometimes required a sharp reminder of what not to mess with. As for the gang, they never came back to that diner. In fact, they started riding in other counties altogether. And every now and then, the leader of that pack, whose name turned out to be Rick Bull Monroe, would tell the tale to new recruits. Not with shame, but reverence. She was maybe 5 feet tall, gray hair, pearls and all, he'd say, nursing a beer. And she could have ended me in 2 seconds flat. Only thing she wanted was pie. And then, always it. I paid for it. Best damn pie I ever bought. End of story.